This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour
with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head
on your home of the Gamecocks in Columbia.
107.5 The Game.
On 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach and 100.5
The Game in Florence.
This Wednesday morning, Chris, I believe a round of applause is in order.
Oh, thank you. What did I do?
Do you know why?
Nope, no clue.
Wes showed up at 10:55 this morning. He was a whopping 5 minutes earlier than he usually is.
I thought you were congratulating me.
Well, I was saying we are congratulating Wes, but
Okay.
Hey, congratulations to you too as well, Chris. You're always here like 30 minutes before.
I think I'd like to find a better balance between getting places way too early. I actually admire Wes's ability to get places on time.
Now
I wish I could do it.
Now you are obviously a dad. Are you like hey, we got to be there super, super early so we don't miss anything, or like do you cut it close with other things?
Yes and no. You have to do that to have any chance of getting somewhere on time.
That's true.
Yeah, with the kids. So
Chris is, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late person, except it's normally 30 minutes early.
That's okay.
Or an hour. It's really bad. It really is a problem. So I've had to readjust and become more efficient while I'm waiting somewhere, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
I'm doing better with it.
I always look out the window and you're over there doing some work, and obviously you guys have plenty going on right now, so you're not lacking for things to do, certainly.
Absolutely not. Tons going on in Gamecock country, and that's without a super busy we're in this recruiting time right now where Carolina's about to have the first home game, so there will be, we don't have the list yet, presumably there will be some visitors coming on campus this week, next week. You're on the road, then the Mississippi State game. So there will be an uptick in recruiting activity, but right now, not as much going on there. It's just the season, but, man, there is plenty going on for sure.
And plenty going on during the week, of course, as we're now into this regular routine of hearing from Coach Beamer and a couple of players on Tuesday, as well as coordinators today. And we'll hear from Beamer again coming up tomorrow night with Carolina Calls, which you can listen to at 6 o'clock right here on the game. Coach Beamer did speak yesterday to the media, talking about a number of things, obviously, the biggest of which being the offensive line issues that we saw on Saturday and how they are working to improve in those areas. And as soon as my mouse starts working here, I'll let you listen to what Coach Beamer had to say.
Take the shots, but we got good players on the offensive line. I would love to say this Saturday, but I know we got to stay healthy, and right now it's just it's a banged up group with, when you count Marquis, when he's healthy, it's essentially 3 true freshmen in your 2 deep on the offensive line, and that's in my opinion, Gene, the farther you are away from the ball, it's easier to play as a true freshman. When you're a true freshman right out of high school and you're blocking 300-pound, really talented men on opposing defensive lines like you face at this level of football in this league, it's tough. It really is. But we've got good players. I was in there with the offensive staff before I walked in here, and we were talking about it. I mean, just watching Tree today in practice and watching Trevon today in practice. Those guys, they are getting better. And we told our team on Sunday, right, and I've used this expression with you guys before, it is a race to improve, to your point. Like, we don't have spring practice in the summer and preseason camp. Like, it's here, guys. So make sure that you're doing everything in your power, mentally and physically, when you're in this building and when you're outside this building, to get better, because we need you now.
And quickly here, Nick Arjulo spoke to the media as well, and he talked about the unit getting better against Furman this weekend.
I'd like to play more cohesive as a unit. I would like to protect the quarterback, to be frank, and I'd just like to see continued growth from the room.
And kind of looking back at what both of them said there, especially Gargiulo talking about playing more as a cohesive unit, which is something they didn't have the opportunity to do on Saturday because they kept rotating so many guys in. You obviously had the Case and Henry injury. Like, we're going into week 2 still unsure of what exactly this starting 5 looks like, and while you do feel like you're going to have a better opportunity against a team like Furman this weekend, Furman is a team that can still give you problems in the trenches as well.
I mean, I think you have a catch-22 here. Like, and here's the thing. You're going to be, if you don't change things, then not that you should really worry deep down what the collective fan base says about your decisions about personnel, but people are going to say, well, why? You didn't change anything. You didn't change anything if you don't change anything. Well, the other side is that in order to get cohesive as a unit, you really want to be able to just make small tweaks and small changes, not have to completely reinvent what your starting 5 is. And so they were kind of caught in the middle really all preseason. That offensive tackle battle, I mean, we talked about it here on the show, over and over again because that battle kept going. Well, that kept you from being able to actually say, all right, here's our starting 5. Let's let them get as many reps together in practice as possible. And like it's been said many times, not an excuse, but you don't have preseason games to sort of let somebody else go ahead and expose your issues. You're practicing against yourself every single day. And, North Carolina was able to expose some of those things. I will say this. The depth chart was updated on Monday. There was maybe one change on the offensive line. Don't read into that. Like,
That's not going to be the starting 5, Wes?
I mean, some weeks it will be.
Well,
but,
I mean, Ja'Kai Moore shows up in 2 different spots on that updated depth chart. So
yeah, Ja'Kai's going to pull double duty. But here's the thing. It's Monday, which so they do practice Sunday, but Sunday is more of a young player and more of a correction day. Monday is their NCAA mandated day off, which is the day that the depth chart came out. So I appreciate that they did, updated the depth chart based on the guys that are out for an extended period of time, took them off, added somebody in their place. But, I have seen the take, oh man, they haven't changed anything. Well, it's not going to – if they have different 5 guys out there or different combinations of guys, that may be reflected in next week's depth chart after we've all seen it. But don't read into absolutely changes are completely on the table this week. Now, what those actually are, Chris, I think depends on how do those guys respond in practice. If you say, hey, we're going to give this guy a shot, and then he whiffs on every block, you're going to say, well, we're not giving you a shot. On Saturday. But all these things are on the table. I would expect some more shuffling, which you have to do, but you don't want to do.
Yeah, it's you used a great term, catch-22, and that's where they are with the offensive line right now. And, Shane Beamer made a great point in that you don't have spring ball, you don't have summer, you don't have preseason camp, the first half of preseason camp, where you're just saying, all right, we're working on South Carolina. We're figuring out our combinations. We're developing. The developing time is over, right? Like now, every single week, you're getting Sunday for corrections, like Wes said. You're off on Monday per NCAA rules. You got to have that day off. And then you've really got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Friday's going to be your walkthrough day. That's almost hay in the barn time. So you really have kind of 3 critical – they're all important. All the other days are. The day off is important. But you got those 3 critical days in the middle of the week. And what you're having to use those for now is to find a workable combination. And so you don't have time. Let's talk about the freshmen, right? So Marquis Anderson doubtful for this game. We'll in the future, he'll be on the table. Right now, he's not as much. But Trovon Ball, Tree Babalade, who's a tackle, he's going to have an opportunity. Tro Ball, even during preseason camp, got some first-team reps at times, just kind of behind the scenes for different reasons. If they stick one of those guys in there, and Beamer alluded to this yesterday too, there will be growing pains.
Yep.
They're going to miss an assignment. They're going to get beat. And so there's kind of this trade-off of, all right, do you ride, if they're kind of all things being equal, do you just ride with a freshman or two, whether it's a rotation guy or a starter? Maybe so. They've also got some guys. I mean, Gargiulo can play multiple spots, and Ja'Kai Moore can play multiple spots, as the depth chart indicated and as his career has indicated. So we'll see where it comes out. I don't know if we have a good answer yet as to what that combination is going to look like.
I think I would imagine this is kind of reading between the lines, putting together some stuff we've heard. I think you're going to see Troy Ball get his shot. Does that mean he starts? Maybe, maybe not. Does that mean he rotates in? Do you move some guys out to tackle? There's already an indication that could be happening with Ja'Kai Moore, being at right tackle on the depth chart, but also being listed at right guard. But if you slide Ja'Kai out, Gargiulo has played outside before. If you start sliding guys out, you've got to move guys into these guard spots. I think that's where you look at, Trey Jones probably has a shot. He was first off the bench on the interior on Saturday. And then Ball, who, was a pretty highly rated guy in his own right, but wasn't quite up there with Tree or Marquis. They've long thought he was very far along in his development, even as a high school player. So he was maybe the guy you circled, saying he didn't come in the spring, but is pretty technically sound for a freshman. So, I think if you're going to give those guys a shot, you might as well go ahead and do it this week and then see how it goes.
And obviously, you don't want to get hurt at any position, but looking across this entire offensive line, with Henry being out for an extended period of time, Marquis Anderson dealing with his injury issues, talk about a place you cannot afford any more injuries at all. And depending on who it is, depends on which way you move the chess pieces around, but you're kind of at the bottom of the barrel on options that you have, it seems like, and you can't afford to lose anyone now.
Well, especially at offensive tackle, man. Like they've got some pieces to work with on the inside. Now you're kind of faced with the fact that your lack of options at offensive tackle is now affecting your depth and even potentially your starting group, on the inside. So you're trying to figure out how to get your best five. The bad part about that is you could weaken some of your interior spots by trying to spread guys into your offensive tackle spots. And, I was talking to a friend of mine last night. He was like, how did this happen on the offensive line? And, they've recruited incredibly well in this 2024, incoming class for next year. They recruited incredibly well for this 2023 class, freshmen right now. But if you look back and you kind of count back, okay, these guys would be your redshirt freshmen right now. These guys would be your redshirt sophomores right now. These guys would be your redshirt juniors. You're starting to get back into the territory of when South Carolina was a 2-win team, into the territory of when Shane Beamer took over and you really didn't even have a real high school class that year because the class kind of fell apart. So that's why you're looking at South Carolina having to take a bunch of transfers. It's hard to win on the offensive line with transfer portal guys, honestly, even though you can find them. Gargiulo has been great. It's just it's very difficult to do. And so if you want a reason why, go back, even look at the overall numbers in those classes on the offensive line compared to the numbers that South Carolina is aiming to take these last couple of years, and you start to kind of see why they're dealing with these issues.
Another area that they have concerns is with linebacker. Coach Beamer spoke about that yesterday as well. We'll hear from him coming up. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on the
Diamond for diamond, no one compares with Mervis. At Mervis Diamond Importers, our natural diamonds come straight from the mines in Africa, and our mermaid lab-grown diamonds beat all others for quality and value. Come view our brilliant diamonds, both natural and lab-grown. Mervis diamonds are so bright and full of fire they will blow you away. So will the affordable prices. Our diamonds may steal your heart, but not your wallet. See our mermaid lab-grown diamonds and learn how to get a larger diamond for less. You can get a bigger mermaid lab-grown diamonds than you ever thought possible. And with Mervis financing, you can enjoy up to 5 years to pay with zero interest. A generous full-value trader policy and our lifetime warranty program easily make Mervis your first choice. When you mount a world-class Mervis diamond into a designer ring from our huge collection, there is no equal. Mervis Diamond Importers, For an appointment, call 800-HER-LOVE or go to mervisdiamond.com. Again, that's 800-HER-LOVE or go to mervisdiamond.com.
Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. I want to let you know, Jay and Terry can be broadcasting the afternoon show today from 3 until 6 out at Todd and Moore. If you're looking for Gamecock gear for game day or the latest athletic shoe styles from famous name brands, go straight to Todd and Moore, your hometown sports store, 620 Hughes Street. Always the best prices and lowest selections for everyone. Open from 10 until 6 Monday through Saturday, and just below the Coliseum near Blossom Street. So again, Jay and Terry out there for the afternoon show today from 3 until 6. Yesterday, Coach Beamer started off his press conference with the news of the day that we had gotten a couple hours before, talking about Mo Kaba.
We obviously released the information about Mo Kaba. Heartbreaks for him. Somebody, obviously a fantastic human being first and foremost, and fantastic player for us. Really hard deal when he tore his ACL last year against Arkansas. And it was tough for us, obviously, to deal with from an emotional standpoint. And kid worked his butt off throughout the offseason, spring practice, was practicing with great energy. And was truly loving being back out there, as you could imagine, smile on his face every day at practice. So really hurt for him, and not wish him well, but we'll wrap our arms around him, and we'll see what the future holds. But I would ask everybody that's affiliated with Gamecock Nation to please think about Mo, because this is tough on him and tough on our football team as well.
And again, we talked about this yesterday. Unfortunate news all the way around, not just from the team perspective, but Mo's a great guy. We've obviously had him in studio with us here before for the Garnet Trust Tower. Worked so hard to get back, and just unfortunate to see him have yet another setback in his career.
Yeah, like we said yesterday, you hate it for him. I mean, you could sort of sense and feel the emotion. I thought, kind of watching Shane Beamer talk about it, and it can be a cruel game, man. As I was watching the Braves last night, and Soroka now dealing with another injury as well.
Yep.
I found myself actually thinking back to Mo and what he is kind of dealing with, and how sports for a lot of these guys, you do hope they have other things in life to kind of grab their attention and find joy. But obviously, if you're going to play at this level, football is a large portion of what you put your energy and effort into. So it's not just the physical part of it, it's the mental part of it as well. You obviously have to, which we did yesterday, you have to talk about what it means for South Carolina as well. But, I've found myself just kind of going back to what it meant for Mo. And I even went back and looked at our interview with him when he was in studio. And he talked about how even though he had been through this before, which of course this was his second one he was coming off of, that he, even knowing, hey, I know what this is going to be like, I know what I'm going to have to go through, that he had some dark moments along the way. So, you certainly feel for him, because he's got a grueling physical process ahead, but a grueling mental process ahead as well.
Yeah, and I remember last year, Mo talking about how Jordan Strong went down, basically right near him on the sideline in that Arkansas game. Both those guys going down with ACL injuries, both of them having been through it before. And then since they were on kind of the exact same timeline, going through a recovery together, going through a recovery that they had both been through before individually, they were able to kind of lean on each other. And so, yeah, you would imagine that's kind of and Shane Beamer indicated as much as in his comments, that can be kind of a lonely place, to be with another injury, the third serious major knee injury for Mo Kaba. So definitely feel for him. A blow to the team, a blow for him, and just tough stuff. And, as we mentioned yesterday, it's worth reiterating, pointing out again, the linebacker depth taking a hit for the Gamecocks. You had three guys who were good enough to start for you. You had a couple other guys who were expected to be in the mix as depth. Bam Scott, who might actually be, starter caliber as well. Yep. We don't know yet his development because we didn't see him in game 1, but he should be back. Pup Howard, he traveled but didn't play. He missed some time in the preseason, banged up as well, but was good by the end of preseason. And Shane Beamer has been very clear that he's going to be working in Pup Howard too defensively. So you still have a few guys that it looks like you can count on, but it's important. I mean, you mentioned offensive line, Tyler. You don't need any more injuries. That's certainly the case at linebacker too.
One name that I feel like we haven't talked about in months, but somebody that could certainly play a role in this room, Jerron Willis, the linebacker transfer from Ole Miss. I mean, we talked about him when he transferred in, and he was a pretty highly touted recruit in the 2023 class. Haven't really heard anything about him in these past couple months outside of just, documenting where he was on the depth or as far as the media availability that you guys had for some practice drills and stuff. But again, when you talk about Mo Kaba being out for the rest of the season and needing some reprieve for Debo and Stone, who played pretty much the entire game the other night, and again, God forbid somebody else gets injured, that is a name that we could certainly hear as well.
Yeah, and you kind of get the feeling from what Beamer said that maybe he's not quite ready yet. And, I think you kind of look right now, if you get Bam Martin Scott back, which, they should very soon, if not this week, those are kind of your 4 guys. So, obviously, Debo, Stone, then you add in Pup, then you add in Bam Martin Scott. So there's your 4, there's your rotation. If you get somebody else banged up, that's when you start to, I think, really get worried, and you're busting into, no offense to the guys, but busting into walk-ons and, players that maybe aren't quite ready for it yet. So I think for them, part of, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy too when you have to play guys. We saw this, let's go back to Muschamp era. We saw you have a position, oh man, can't afford injuries at this position. We don't have depth. We can't count on the guys behind them. Okay, but because we don't have depth, you have to play them every snap. Mm-hmm. So obviously, the more snaps you play, logic would tell us the greater chance of having an injury, just from the pure mathematics of it. That's not even to throw into the account of, well, maybe if you're playing a little bit tired, maybe you're banged up, but you're playing through it, you might potentially put yourself in a spot to get further injured. So I think for them, Debo and Stone, they really showed no signs, I didn't think, of being like winded or tired. Like they were running around. They were up to the challenge. But we've seen this movie before. You can't ask your 2 starting linebackers to go out there and play every single snap. So I think, Bam Martin Scott's had a really good preseason. He's just, dealt with injuries. And, you have to, Stone Blanton, that's the guy that has dealt with shoulder injuries in the past. So to me, Chris, linebacker's kind of a spot like running back. You're going to have bumps and bruises because you're throwing your body around. You're hitting that hole. You're meeting a big running back, in the A gap, and you both have bad intentions. So I think for them, continuing to get Bam Martin Scott, but then continuing to work Pup Howard in there for the first time this week, but letting that be something where he plays a bunch, I think, is going to be critical for them to continue to build depth at that position.
Something else he spoke about yesterday was the wide receiver position, notably about Luke Doty getting some looks on Saturday night, making a few catches as well. We'll hear what Beamer had to say about that. Coming up, you're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, here on the game.
What you're talking about. Sponsored by Love Chevrolet.
On your home of the Gamecocks. In Columbia, 107.5 The Game.
Also heard on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach and 100.5 The Game in Florence.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris here in the Herndon Chevrolet studios, reacting to a lot of what Coach Beamer had to say to the media yesterday. Of course, we'll have the coordinators talking a little bit later on today, and we'll be able to react to that coming up tomorrow. One thing from Saturday night, Luke Doty getting some looks at wide receiver, pulling in 3 catches for 41 yards. Coach Beamer was asked about Luke Doty making the transition to the receiver spot.
Good question, and it is a question for us. There's no question about it. First part of it, the last part first. First part first. You know what I mean? A while ago, he was a guy that he's got receiver skills. He's very natural at it. He's a really good athlete, and I told Luke when we talked about it. We talked about it a little bit last year, but when we were really committed to it this year, I talked to him and I told him, look, like, you're still our backup quarterback, but you're one of our better football players, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to be standing next to me on the field, standing next to me on the sideline for, if we play 70 plays on offense, for 70 plays during games. Let's get you on the field and get you going. You're still, you're still the backup quarterback. You're still a quarterback, but he's awesome. He's smart. For sure. I sit in on those quarterback meetings, so he's able to hear how Dow is coaching the quarterbacks on routes and things like that. But then we're also able to coach him up on the receiver part of it as well. So it's really beneficial for him to be in there with those quarterbacks. Two, he gets time with Justin Stepp, so he's able to get the receiver part of it as well. And we're going to have to do more of that, just the technique and fundamental part of it, playing receiver, beating press coverage, stuff like that as well. But he's got natural hands, and like I said, he's a really good athlete. He's tough and he's smart. And then the other thing too is he's doing some special teams. I mean, he was on our punt pressure team the other night, so whenever North Carolina punted, Luke was out there as well, and we'll probably continue to emphasize and increase that role also. We do have to be smart because he is a quarterback, and we can't ask him to do too much, but it's something that we really talked about early in preseason camp, and credit Luke to him, and he got reps at it, but it wasn't like it was a ton of reps, and he's playing in there in the slot where AB is and Eddie Lewis is, but it's just a way to create more depth at that receiver position.
I thought Luke looked phenomenal for a guy who kind of, isn't a full-time wide receiver, frankly. Like, he's taking second-team quarterback reps. He is in a position where that's been his primary position for most of his college career. We know he took some reps at receiver as a true freshman. I do think it is beneficial. For one, Luke is just one of those guys that kind of naturally is good at a lot of different things. Two, some of our locals here will remember, he played receiver at Myrtle Beach as a sophomore in high school because they had a senior quarterback who was coming back. So he does have experience playing the position. I thought he looked pretty explosive with the ball in his hands. You could tell, he got open. There wasn't like a bunch of guys around him, so it seemed like he was kind of looking the ball in, making sure that he held on to it as opposed to just kind of catching it and continuing running. But once he got the ball in his hands, I thought he looked pretty explosive, and it felt to me like he was more of someone that could actually help them at receiver this year, as opposed to this just being, for lack of a better word, like a gimmick. Like we see sometimes, put your athletic quarterback at wide receiver, and we see different results. Sometimes it's a cool thing for fans to talk about, and it never amounts to much of anything. Combine what we saw from Luke in a little bit of time on Saturday with the questions at wide receiver after the main three, and I think this is viable. Like I think Luke can catch double-digit passes this year. He's already a third of the way there almost.
This is another catch-22, I think, for the staff. And Beamer alluded to it there at the end of that soundbite he gave, saying we got to be careful about how much we do because he's a backup quarterback. So to me, that begs the question. I mean, Luke can do what he did in game one, splitting time, obviously, because he did it. But do you give him more? Because I still have – it's a one-game sample, Wes, right? So I don't think we need to write off, Eddie Lewis. Eddie Lewis not out there, only was out there on special teams, I believe, from what I saw. But Nick Carver's still in there, Omega Blake, et cetera. And those guys could have better games. But, Omega Blake, he played 53 snaps. He had one target, didn't have a catch in the game. Mm-hmm. And obviously there were a lot of reasons for that, right? That we already established they didn't run the ball well. Offensive line was not good in this game. So it's not just on him. Xavier Legette had a career game, on the other hand. So Luke did look good, and I think he's a really good athlete. He's smart. He's reliable. He's going to run the right routes for you. Kind of checking with some people around the program. That's kind of the review I got of how, use the word viable, Wes, how viable is this? I would be extremely tempted if I was South Carolina staff to devote more time to Luke Doty at receiver, because I think he could legitimately help, and he could answer that question for you. You know, who are our guys behind our starting three? That's not established at all yet. But you also have to balance, okay, if something happens to Spencer Rattler, if he has to come out of the game, what is your next move? Is it still Luke if you devote more time to him at the wide receiver position? Is it Lenoris Sellers, who we all think behind the scenes, you know, he only gave 2 quarterbacks on the depth chart, but we all think Lenoris Sellers is a guy that's the quarterback of the future and could even factor in some type of role this season. So that's kind of the tension in all this, but it is just one game. So, you don't write off what you saw from the other guys, and you don't anoint Luke. But I think we've heard enough, Wes, even aside from his performance in the game, we heard splitting time in preseason camp that he had made some plays. So I would be very tempted to give him more run at receiver.
Yeah, well, he went out there and he did it on a game when you were struggling to find guys to go make a lot of plays for you. And, I think for the rest of that room, you got to continue to bring Harbor along. We got to remember with Harbor, we all tried to warn people. Beamer tried to warn people like, hey, don't put the expectation. It's not fair to put the expectation because of his very unique background on him to come in and catch, 10 passes in game 1. Well, we know he was banged up as well. So a guy like Juice Wells can miss a ton of reps and go back out there and play, and even Juice kind of was not himself as far as getting into the flow of that game and making a bunch of plays. So I think it would be foolish to expect a Nick Harbor to be able to just come in and impact a game 1 when he's missed so many of those valuable reps in practice. So they're going to have to keep bringing Harbor along, I think, as far as one of those backup guys. I think there's still a role for Elijah Caldwell to come along. Can you bring him along as the season progresses? I think he's an option. I was a little bit, I would say more than a little bit. I was downright surprised we didn't see more of Eddie Lewis. And, when you look at the issues there, you look at what he did and pass stops. I don't want to be speculation guy, but, it had me wondering, was he banged up leading into this game as well? Because he did get in on special teams, but it was at punt return, and that was after AB had exited the game, and he just fair caught it. Mm-hmm. So, was that a case of just he was available but not quite 100%? So it was like, hey, man, go fair catch this ball.
And remember, he was I've just now popped in my head the name you coined, Eddie Blue, because he was in blue for a practice, one of our viewing windows. So at least at some point during preseason, he was in a blue jersey. Now, he's never, to my recollection, he was never listed on an injury report or anything of that nature that Beamer gave, but that's entirely possible because when you look at it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? He's consistently mentioned in that second tier, that second group of receivers, but Nick Harbor, I think, played 10 snaps. Omega played 53. Luke played, I think, 25 or so snaps. I think those are the only guys that played at receiver. So
Peyton Mangrum did too.
Peyton Mangrum played a little bit and played
about 10 snaps or so, it feels like.
Yeah, so usually you would expect Eddie Lewis to be in there. So in the future, I would think we'll see a little more.
He was consistently listed on the depth chart with the twos and was with the twos when we were out there as well.
So it doesn't really match. So
yeah, again, not trying to speculate, but the evidence is there that something wasn't quite what you would expect.
Yeah, and we'll see what they do with the wide receivers this weekend against Furman and how many of them they do end up using. Again, coming up later today, we're going to hear from the coordinators ahead of the Furman game and recapping what happened against North Carolina. We'll preview that a little bit coming up. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on the game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour
with Chris Clark. Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head.
On your home of the Gamecocks in Columbia, 107.5 The Game.
Also heard on 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach.
And 100.5 The Game in Florence.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Myself, Wes, and Chris. A few more minutes to go before myself and Elijah carry today's edition of the halftime show. Again, Jay and Terry broadcasting live out at Todd Moore for the afternoon show coming up from 3 to 6 right here on The Game. Chris was telling me during the break, SC StatCast on Twitter, that is Clark Brooks, who has any and every SC stat you can think of, especially during football season, put one out yesterday about Spencer Rattler's pass chart versus North Carolina, and we've talked about this for these past couple days already, that despite the O-line issues, Spencer Rattler played a great game, all things considered, and these numbers certainly back that up.
Yeah, the numbers definitely back up the eye test, and Clark has, you're right, Tyler, he has got every stat you can possibly think of to where you will definitely need a key to find out what does this particular thing mean, what is a dot, and what is any dash a, things like that. But some key stats that come from this, 90.9 adjusted completion percentage. That is obviously really good, very close to 100. Only 7.7% uncatchable balls, 17.9% explosive, just 2.6% of passes were interceptable. And I think, Wes, you had said that PFF had Spencer Rattler with no turnover-worthy plays.
Correct.
So that honestly, guys, was maybe the most amazing thing about the entire performance, is that despite running for his life for much of the game, despite the pressure he was under, Spencer took very good care of the ball, which actually was a huge reason that despite not playing well at all, South Carolina still had an opportunity to be in this game late in the game. Clark Brooks also pointed out, guys, some other things that backed up what we saw with our eyes. The total pressure rate allowed by the team was 39.2%, and Clark says that's well into the danger zone. I don't know.
Well in caps into the danger zone.
Yeah, and I don't know what his line is for the danger zone. I don't know if it's 25%, 30, but you can just look at it, just however you slice it. 39.2% on a pressure rate, not great. And then one more. So the past two seasons, South Carolina has finished in the bottom 5 in rush yards before contact in the country, and Clark says that they've got an excellent chance. That's not a compliment the way he's saying it, of finishing in that metric for the third straight year. They had 16% success rate running the ball against UNC, and DeCarrion Joyner with the lone broken tackle in the run game. So, again, just lends credence to the idea that what we saw with the offensive line, it was pretty much that ugly at times on Saturday night.
Yeah, when you look at the chart on scstatcast.com about where his distribution was, a lot of it was in that 1 to 10 yard area just past the line of scrimmage where most of his completions were. And again, when you don't have a lot of time in the pocket to let the play develop, that's about what you get. And again, overall, all things considered, Rattler had a very solid night against North Carolina.
Yeah, Clark, man, this guy is absolutely phenomenal at breaking this stuff down. He also said that this is something Clark has always been a little bit hung up on with Spencer, would be the number of shorter throws or throws behind the line of scrimmage. 23% were targeted behind the line of scrimmage on Saturday. That's actually down a decent amount from 31% last year, which he still thinks 23% is too much. I would argue with this game, you kind of had to. They were trying to use that as an extension of their running game a lot, I think, so that played into it. He said for the most part, and this is where you really can, I think, benefit from Clark. You can find a lot of these the actual stats, but Clark is literally diagramming the offenses, which I don't even know how he does it.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, it's insane. But he said for most of the pass plays were similar to last year. Even though he said there were some new patterns in there, he said the biggest switch was that, remember how much they talked about running duo under Satterfield? Yeah. He said that duo not involved or not called much, if at all, and that there wasn't much counter called either. But some of that, I mean, look at how few plays South Carolina ran on offense. We're still gathering data. He does mention this Texas pattern, which actually was one of my favorite calls of the game. It was down near the goal line. It was right before South Carolina's first touchdown of the game, first touchdown drive of the season. It was Joyner on an angle route, and then so he's out of the backfield. He makes like he could be going to the flat, then he cuts across the middle, and then right behind that, you have Trey Knox on the post route, so it puts the linebacker in conflict. It puts man coverage in conflict and basically gives Spencer a high-low right there between the two guys, and that was a great ball from Spencer, accurate on time to Trey Knox, where they almost got into the end zone, and they ran it in with Joyner very next play. That felt like a Dow Loggins NFL call to me.
Well, Texas is one of the best plays on NCAA football, and I think they have it on Madden too. But it's seriously one of my go-tos when you need. Back in the day when I used to play, if you needed something on third down, you're going to Texas. The angle route's perfect. Here's another thing, Wes. You pointed out you did see a lot of quick throws. So you saw, second play of the game, you see a quick throw out there to Trey Knox. North Carolina kind of had it covered up. South Carolina did not block well from what I saw, perimeter, screen game. But we also saw some quick passes out to DeCarrion Joyner, and one of the areas in which North Carolina got the better of the Gamecocks, open field tackling. Mm-hmm. Right, there were several of those plays where you go, man, you got to make a guy miss there. It kind of had me wondering, do we see a little bit more Juju McDowell, who's one of their better open field guys, just trying to get him more involved in those types of concepts in space? There's a trade-off there. That's kind of a theme of what we've been talking about many of these areas today, pass protection, inside running. But that's a thought that I had coming out of that, and some of these plays saying, man, wonder what Juju could do with that type of play.
Well, I thought they got Juju out there.
Yep, they did get him some, yep.
To set up one of the touchdowns that I think Juju himself ran in one play later from the one. Mm-hmm. They got AB into some space at times, and he proved, even if he is a little bit of a long strider is what I think Loggins called him, if you give AB a little bit of space, it reminded me a good bit of how we saw him used, 2 seasons ago against North Carolina in that same stadium. If you give him a little crease, he can make something happen. Obviously, he won't set drop back. I'm sure nobody felt worse than him. Nobody's perfect. But I thought what we saw from AB was very viable as well, in that he can be a big part of this offense in the passing game. So you take all the data if you're Dow Loggins, you adjust, and you move forward.
Last thing here, anything particularly you're looking forward to hear from the coordinators today?
No.
Simply no.
That's my way of turning it over to Chris.
No, I think,
we're going to learn Saturday.
Yeah, we'll learn Saturday. Loggins isn't going to give away a lot.
No.
He'll be philosophical as usual. And just to get Clayton White's assessment, I thought they were up and down. How did they play?
Fair enough. That'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Elijah coming up here on the game.